Welcome, everybody. Welcome, people online. I'd like to give to you our famous Barbara Smith.
Thank you for coming tonight. Tonight, obviously, if you looked up here, it's on propagation. It's that time. You actually should start our seeds a little earlier than now, but it's fine to start them now. Not all seeds are going to germinate in spring, so you have some plants that you plant late spring, early summer for fall. So I sort of follow the plants. If the plant drops its seeds in late fall, I'll throw some seeds on late fall if I have that particular plant. Like these I collected in the fall, and I put out a bunch of them. And you can see where they already fell out of the shafts, and there's a lot of seed in here. This is ironweed, frostproof, what is it? It's not four corners. What's that one that's foursome? No, it's a native. White flower with brown in the middle. Four stem, and Coreopsis. Yeah, that's what she's calling it. Coreopsis, red sage, lilac sage, and Minardi or horseman. So there's a lot of seed in here, and I'm going to throw it all in my flower bed, my native flower bed, and see what comes up. But you don't want to hold them much longer than 6 months. And if you do hold them at all, I would put them in a cool, dry place. Not necessarily in the refrigerator, but you don't want them out in the shed where they're going to get too hot. So these have been kept in the pantry. So I'm going to throw all these this weekend. It's going to be a fun weekend. Anyway, you gather your seeds. Do not put them in a sealed container, whether you use medicine bottles or whatever you use, jars, bags. Do not put them in until they're totally dry, because there will be a fungus when just a few days, you'll open it up and it'll be all moldy fungus. So make sure your seed is dry before you store them in a container. Some people just put them inside a paper bag, label them, and put them in the pantry, or sometimes they put them in the refrigerator. But I wouldn't cool them too much. If your refrigerator, like mine, ice is in the top, that wouldn't be a good place for some of these plants. Although some like it cold. So you have to figure out what your seed is, so you know how to store it. So there's information online, there's information in our native stuff, and I'm sure that if you have a question, is Steve here? Steve can answer just about any question on propagation. That's where I got a lot of my information from. Okay, how do you do seeds? Well, I'm going to pass this around. Be very careful not to spill it, or you got to pick them all up. This is a combination of Cherokee bean, passion seed, Indian blanket, Coreopsis, Echinacea, and black-eyed Susans. What I want you to do is see the difference in the sizes and everything of the seed. So not all seed is treated the same. Obviously, the Cherokee bean needs to be scarified. A lot of people they get confused when they hear scarification. Scarification can be a number of things. It has to soak 24 hours before you can plant it. It has to be cooled in the refrigerator before you can plant it. Magnolia seeds are like that. Maybe it needs heat, like the lupins. They come up great after a fire, runs through the field. Mostly, some seeds need to be nipped. These have to be nipped. So you take a pair of clippers or whatever and just nip the corner of it. Some people use a pair of pliers, but be very, very careful on it. Or you can just soak them for 48 hours, add a little yeast to it, and plant them, and you're taking your chances. You won't get a great percentage of them come up, but some of them will come up. But that's all scarification means. It's a process. Some of them have to go through the digestive system of a squirrel or a bird. And the good thing about that, it comes out already fertilized. So some things have to be digested. It's not native, but anyone know how a fig gets pollinated? Carefully. It's actually a fruit that has an opening in the end, and a little tiny, tiny wasp goes in, and the fruit closes up. The flowers are inside that seed pod, and it's pollinated by that little wasp, and then the wasp is digested by the enzymes of the plant, and that's how your fig gets produced, it gets pollinated. So some things are really tricky. Some things are done by bats, some are by lizards, a lot of things can pollinate, but your seeds have to be pollinated. Don't try to grow your flowers. People try this with vegetable growing all the time. I'm gonna put them on the lawn, I won't get bugs. You also won't get bees. So unless you go out with a paintbrush and cross-pollinate each flower, you're not gonna get fruit. So remember that. Nature has a very, very important role in everything we do. And they did it long before we did. So I use these trays here to do my seed. They're kind of old, but they're still useful. Until they can't hold soil, they get used by me. It's a 6 cell. And I put them in these trays. They fit perfect in these long trays. Fill them up with seed soil. I do use the seed soil. Some people don't. Some people add more perlite to it. I feel like this is enough for doing seed. And then when it comes out, I wait till I see roots coming out the bottom of the little cells. And then you just grab each cell, pinch it a little bit, and slip it out into the hand to transplant it. You don't want to yank on it because those roots are new, they're tender, and they're not a root ball yet. So you have to be very, very gentle with them. Sort of roll them out. Have your hole pre-dug. Don't try to do a hole after you get the plant in your hand. Put your holes in first when you transplant them from this thing into the ground or in the pots, and then you're dealing with root ball, and that's a totally different story in how to transplant. But I'll show you some transplants tonight when we get down to that end of the table. So when you do your seeds, I would do each one. If I want to do like 6 of different seeds, or if I want to do 12 of each seed, there's actually there's 30 places here to put a seed in. So if you're going to make, you can use cedars. I don't like cedars. They fall apart. I don't like cedars because they're hard to use. So I just use my fingers. Dry. Do not have wet fingers and try to propagate seed. You're going to have them on your finger, and then they're going to be on your pants, and they're going to be all over the place, and they're going to come up there. So something dry. There's dibblers. This is called a dibbler. It's an English dibbler, and all it's doing is to make a hole. So I would actually use the dibblers when I did the Cherokee bean. You don't really need a dibbler for any other seed that we have out there tonight. But if it's a bigger seed, make the hole, set it in there, pat. Do not push. Pat down the soil. When you're going to scatter your seed, you can scatter them from the container, but it depends on your shake. You may get more than you want. I usually put them out, and then I set them in with tweezers. Okay? Or you can do an empty tray with no inserts. Just put the soil in there, scatter them like you're doing vegetables, and then thin them out later when you're transplanting them. So a lot of seed, as you can see in there, the black-eyed Susan is the tiniest seed that's in that tray. So they're very, very tiny. Not as tiny as some others. There's some smaller than that. So you want to be very careful when you're putting them out. So you just kind of shake them out, or use the tweezers, and then you're going to take a little bit of soil, not a lot. You don't want them buried like 1/8 of an inch. So you just kind of move the soil over and pat, pat, pat. Then after you pat, use vermiculite. What happens with most of our seedlings is they look beautiful one day, and you come out 1 or 2 days later, and they're all falling over with that little rotted bottom. It's called damp off. And what it is your soil may not be as sterile as it should be. This is a sterile substance. It's used in potting soils. The original use was when they buried people back in the day when they didn't have a lot of chemicals that they use now. And they would put this in the case casket before they put the body in it. It would keep the smell down. So vermiculite was originally used for burying people. But you just put a light coat on it, and this you can use from the container, just enough to cover that soil.
Do you sterilize your containers?
Yes, you should use new containers or sterilize them with bleach or white vinegar. That's the only 2 things I would sterilize them with. Not the 2 together, just one of those with water. So putting this on will actually prevent damp off. And then you want to make sure you water them in good. When you initially plant them, for the first few days till you see that little seedling coming up, And the first set of seeds are called cotyledons. And the second set, they won't look like the plant. The second set of leaves will look like the plant. So they're all going to come up and look the same, basically. That's why you label them. Put your label in there. If this tray is Black-Eyed Susan, label it Black-Eyed Susan. Use either a grease pencil. You can buy them at Home Depot. You can buy them at Office Supplies. It's a wax pencil, and it does not wash off. Actually, it's better than the marker. Or use a permanent Sharpie marker that's permanent, or any marker that's permanent, but you want that fine tip. Because if you get the fat marker and you're going to put on this sign, I don't see you putting Black-Eyed Susan on there. Unless you have a great hand writing. But use the pointy end and cap it in between. Cap it in between. You don't know how many people lose their markers because they set it down and go to the next tray, and when you pick it up, it sort of works that time, and the next time, make sure you put the cap on and make sure it snaps. So anyway, grease pencil or magic marker. You can also put them out, the soil in egg cartons. You don't close it. Put them in egg cartons, and these will hold up pretty good for the first about month. But what's nice about it is when you go to plant them, you just break off the carton because it's going to have the moisture and it's going to break off pretty easily. You don't disturb the roots that way. The roots inside this would biodegrade and become a natural fertilizer for the plant. So these are great. Okay. The next one we're going to do is cuttings. Cuttings are, and you don't need seed mix. You're going to use the regular potting soil. You can use potting soil and sand. You can just use sand. You can even propagate them in the compost you get from the dump. But remember, with the compost from the dump, almost guaranteed, in a year or two down the road, you are going to have stinkhorn mushrooms. And if you never smelled one, it makes flies happy. Let's just put it that way. It smells like dying corpse, dying meat, rotting meat. So it's not really a good thing to have. The females are orange, and when they bust, they come up and then they open up on the sides and squat, and there's really, really bright red seeds inside. Or flower, actually they're the flowers. Will be the flower. The male is a tall, thin, white, mushroom-looking guy with a little brown cap on. But if you get them, don't pull them up from the top. You got to reach your hand down in the soil. The bottom feels like an eyeball, basically. You know what an eyeball would feel like. It's true, but if you don't get those up, you're going to keep getting them up. So you don't. And I could be within a 30-foot radius, and I can smell them. I'll follow them for my nose. My nose will find them. So any type of soil you use, I like to use this because they're getting a good start. And then when I pot them up into a pot, I don't go directly into the soil. I put mine in pots and let them grow in there for like 3 or 4 months to establish a better root ball. So when you're doing cuttings, the trick is to know where to take the cutting from. Gail brought us in a bunch of plants, and I brought in some. And what we want to do is make sure, this is red sage. What you don't want to use is this floppy part up here. This is actively the active meristem. The cells are divided. So those cells are made to go into a growth. They're not made to make a root. So you want to take that part out. Actually, I'm going to take it down to the second one. Then you want one node out, one node in. Remember, the node is where the leaves come out. So there's the upper node. This is the bottom node. And you want to take the leaves off the bottom node. You can use rooting hormone, but I don't. And you want to make sure that node is underneath the soil. And that's all there is to propagating something like that. Make sure it's firmed up.
So I've tried to do something like that with basil, and it never would move. So I'm thinking.
You're using too much of the tender stuff, probably. You need to go, you want to go basically where you start to see the stem change its color. It's green at the top. Some of them aren't so.
I think what I did was I tried to stick that whole thing in there instead of cutting it up.
Oh, no. You want to leave some out and some in. The reason for this leaves up here is when you spray the water on it, it doesn't have roots now, so it's going to be making roots. But it has to have moisture. So this is critical that you keep them moist throughout the day. You want to put them in a shady place where the squirrels won't get them. I don't know where that's at. You can put them in a lanai where they're going to get high light but no direct sunlight. That's a good place for them, but they can't stay there their whole life, but they can root there. So that would be a kind of the sage. Okay, this is, okay, Gail. Oh, it's lantana, never mind, never mind. The lantana, again, see how wimpy that is? And there's no green, and if you look at the stem, this is green, and you see how it's been sort of pinky? That's where you want your cutting. Now, on some, if you go too far, and you get into too much of right up against it. Come up afterwards when we're done, and I'll show you how to do one if you have a question about it. Okay, I took that off. I'm gonna leave these leaves on, since they're small leaves. And then, oops, I see you, little flower. Okay? I used to do this every day when I worked in the nursery. It's tedious.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and that's about all we need to do on that. You can come up and see, you can question any of these cuttings. And I'll be taking them home and finishing them. Okay, the last one I want to teach you is transplants. Our wildflowers have a mind of their own. They come up wherever they want to. Well, some people may know Roxanne used to be a member. I was at her yard on Sunday. And the nice thing about her yard, the last 15 minutes, I get to go around gathering seed, taking cuttings, or pulling up transplants that are in the walkway. So I got a motherload on Sunday. So what you want to do here, use good potting soil or mix it with sand. You can mix that with sand. Most of these plants will adapt to just sand, but you want to get them into a good start. Fill your pot halfway with soil. Take a plant. This is Lyerly sage. Look how great they are. They were nice sized plants already.
What's that?
Lyerly sage. It's a blue spike. And then the leaf is green, but it has kind of a red vein through it. And they do spread. They spread by roots, they spread by seed, and you gotta love them. Take off some of the lower leaves so that you're not setting it right on the soil. Okay? Or any broken leaves, like this one here is broke. And what you do here is you open up the center. You may need to do a little bit of trimming. If the roots are too wide for the pot, just trim back some of these roots, but don't take a lot of those feeder roots. When you come up, I'll show you. There's a lot of little hair roots on these roots. So what you want to do is mound it up in the middle. Just take your fingers and make a little mound in the middle. Separate your roots, set it right down on the mound. Oops, put it on the floor. And then just hold your leaves up and add the soil around it. And never, never, ever cover the crown. Never, ever leave it out of the ground. So you want to put the soil right up to the base where the leaves are coming out on this type of plant. Okay? So there's that one. And then I got a bunch of coreopsis that I'll be taking home and transplanting. Some are bigger than others. Okay, they have more of a taproot. See the root on these? So you're going to clean off any lower leaves, and they just pinch right off. It's not that big of a deal. You can pull them off, peel them down, it doesn't matter. Now on this one, you see feeder roots up here, and then it has a taproot. Go ahead and cut your taproot. Now you want to use some sort of a dibbler, stick, pen, or knife, anything to do to put the hole in the center. That one was a mound. This one is a hole in the center. And you take it carefully, open it up to where those feeder roots go in without bending them back. And don't ever hold your roots together like this and put it in. Let those roots just go down, put the hole in the middle, and then put your soil around that, covering those little feeder roots. But again, make sure you come up to the crown, but not over the crown.
Barbara, can you tell us why you cut the taproot off?
Because it's going to continue to go down and not put out feeder roots. So you're sort of pruning it, and when you prune, you get new growth above the prune. In this case, you prune the root, you get new growth above the tap.
All right. So are you basically demonstrating that when you're doing this, you should basically pull the plant and take all the dirt off? Is that
Not necessarily, it comes off. I just use a trowel and go underneath. Now, if I'm doing it at my house, I'll go underneath with the trowel, and I already have a hole for it, and I just carry it over carefully to the new hole and drop it in.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah,
So
that's it. I just did it, this just come off because that's where they are. This is a multi-tray. Let's see what we got in here.
You can take those and just plant them out into your garden bed rather than a pot?
You can. This is the native petunias. I'm just making a new clean cut on the ones that were cut with the trowel. Okay, now they have like legs, but they also have feeder roots. So this one you would take your nibbling and do open the center all the way. So that you open about that much in the middle. Set that down in there carefully. And if you have to use a dibbler to help the roots down, you can do that, just don't push hard on it. And again, fill it up to the top of the, where the leaves are coming out the top, or what's called the crown. Here's a neat one. You see these in bloom right now. This has a taproot, the seed is still attached, and then it doesn't have a lot of hair roots, so I'm not sure if this one's gonna make it, but this is a jigsaw plum. So you just open it out. Now this one, it's hard to tell where the crown is, so you'll see where it comes from white to pink. So you want to bury the white, leave the pink above. So where the wood changes. It's for another class. It has mites. That's for a different class. Okay, this is horseman. Horseman's really easy. Great for seed, easy for roots. It has a cluster of roots, so you just open it up, set that in there, and cover it up. And you can put more than one in a pot. I went with the ones that are going to be rounded plants, but some of these that go straight up, you can do that with. Red sage is another one that I found. That was in the walkway. Again, it has a lot of fibrous roots. I don't have any more pots, but all you do is trim this out and use the mound method. See? And you set that in there. There's some dead wood on here, and make sure the dead wood was all cut out. Winter's damage. Now, if it's showing flowers, I would cut them off, but this is just showing growth, and these are very vigorous, so there's no need to tip these off. Just let them go ahead and set it down in that pot on top of a mound, put the soil on top of those roots. Any questions about seedlings? Transplants? I got lizard tail. I got a good deal on them. I got lizard tail, red sage, Lardy sage, wheat sunflower, coreopsis,
So vines pretty much do the same thing?
Huh?
You pretty much do the same thing for vines, vine cutting?
Vine's gonna be different. You're gonna have different roots. Now, when you pull up seedlings from a vine, they're probably gonna have, like the Chickasaw plum, they'll probably have one root down. Unless you let them in the ground a little longer, and then you can dig them up and transplant them with a mound. It all depends on what the roots are gonna tell you what you have to do. Has a long tap, tip it, put it straight down. Has a lot of fibrous ones, mound it. Okay? That's just the lateral ones, set it in and put the soil on top. So the roots, when you dig them up, will tell you how to plant.
Can you root any vines in water?
You can, but that's the hardest way to transplant a plant,
Right.
because those roots are very, very tender, and it's very hard to transplant without breaking those roots. And because they didn't establish roots into a soil, they have nothing to adhere to. And if you break those roots off, you're back to a cutting. So that's the hardest way. It works with some house plants, but it doesn't work with basically outside plants. Question back there?
It just, I mean, I've been making cuttings and transplants and all for more than 20 years. I've learned so much from you tonight, and I've made a lot of mistakes over the years, but I'm just curious. I mean, honestly, if I were new to this, I would be discouraged thinking I'm going to make mistakes.
No. Plants are forgiving, believe me. Especially these plants. Plants that are herbaceous, meaning that they never develop really woody stems, are very, very forgiving. I have laid them on the ground in a row of just dug a roll, put them in there, put a little soil on them, and they stood up through and through like that. So you're not gonna make a mistake unless you take that tap all the way up, and trimming the roots is not gonna hurt them at all. So just trial and error, that's all I've done. I mean, of course, I used to do it for a living, but that was for somebody else made the money, I just didn't work. But, yeah, yes, David.
What about the watering after you plant it?
Okay, critical on seeds, you don't let them ever dry out. You don't let your cuttings dry out. These, you treat them just like a normal pot. As long as that soil doesn't dry out, it means it can get somewhat dry, but not totally dry. They already have a root system. So this is the easiest way to do it, is the transplants. And I know that if you come to the demo garden to help me clean it up, you get to take adoptees home, which are transplants. Because we can't leave anything in the walkway. So there's constantly something coming out of there. What are we doing on time?
5 minutes over.
Okay, so if there's no more questions, during the break, you want to come up, I'll be up here and I can answer any questions.
Okay, so we have 10 minutes and then we'll get started with our announcements. Take the opportunity, there's some refreshments in the back this month, and we've got some free baby tree seedlings over by the pot, and there's some sign-up sheets and plant, what's blooming and all of that, so mingle, enjoy.
It should come.
Okay, I mean business. All right, thanks everybody for coming. Please find your seats. Another quick announcement, in addition to little free pine trees, there's also free pots outside. So on your way out, if you want to grab some free pots, if you do propagation. I guess I should welcome you all and say hello. I'm Athena Phillips. I'm the past co-president of the chapter. We are still looking for a president. So if you can find it in yourself to help out, we would love you. To get things started, our membership, do we have a membership report from Kay? Actually, she 146. She gave me an update on that. So 146, and we're glad that you all could make it out tonight. Do we have any new members that haven't received their membership packet? Nope, not yet. Okay. Do we have any first-time guests here tonight? Yay! Did you get your plant table tickets already? All right. Oh, and did you get a plant table ticket? Come. Okay, so you're in the game with all of us. I don't think we have any plants that are 2 to a bag, but the policy is if there's 2 plants in a bag, then you get both plants that are in the book to pick. All right. Matter of fact, would you like to do a plant drawing right now? Yeah, we'll get it off to a good start. All right, let's see. We have, huh? You mean the people who win? Right. Yes. Okay. 752. Go get your first one. Here, you can just put it there if you like. No, right there. Never mind. 731. 731. All right, Jane. 7. What's that say? 783. I did this. I did bring glasses. I just forgot to put them on. 653.
Maybe I need to call. No, I'm a good man. 765. 765. All right. 758. Yay, go get it. 739. Take it back. Yep. 683. Yay. 683. 2 more? Okay. 714. And 3 more. Oh, 3 more. 770. 770. And 682. 682. All right.
That's good. So I hope that you all went over to the sign-up sheets, but just to remind you, we're still looking for plant of the month people, and it doesn't have to be a fancy PowerPoint like Ben's going to do tonight. It can be just bringing a plant and telling us about it. It doesn't have to be a plant you like. It can be a native plant that you don't like. It's just the plant of the month, no judgments. All right. We also had Gail Taylor brought in the What's Blooming. That's a really handy thing for you to get familiar if you're not familiar with the current plants that are around. And if anybody sees a flower over there and they don't know what it is, just ask one of us and we'll tell you what it is. So I wanted to pose a little question to you guys. So next month is our last business meeting for the spring. We finish in April and then we have our potluck in May. But we are looking for people to suggest summer activities because we usually like getting together during the summer. Or if you want to organize a summer activity, we'd love to have somebody, volunteer to do one of those. But also I wanted to remind everybody on our website, our calendar on the website lists all the activities that are going on in the immediate area with other chapters that also stay busy during the summer. And if you go to the society's website, you can see all the activities that are going on in the entire state. So if you like making road trips, you might find something very interesting that you'd like to go do. So keep that in mind as things start winding down during the summer, that stuff is still going on. You can, find out what it is. All right, so Gwen, would you like to come up and do another drawing? I'm trying to get this stuff done fast. We want to keep it rolling. I can't hold it and do it.
678. 678. Somebody check your numbers. 727. All right. 775. Excellent. Go for it. 702. 702. 721. 721. 746. 649. 777. 777. 717. Woohoo, okay. 788. Check your numbers. 788. 740. One more. 676.
All right, so we have a few reports to take care of. Marcy will be presenting Everybody Wins with Native Landscaping at the Withlacoochee Gulf Preserve in Yankeetown tomorrow. Marcy, was there anything that you wanted to say about that, or is that sufficient? Oh, there you are. Okay. I love the Withlacoochee Gulf Preserve. It's a beautiful place. Yeah. Okay, so 10 a.m. tomorrow. We have 2 field trips coming up this month, both of them coincidentally leaving from Inverness at the Haven Street Trailhead. So if you're interested in those, one is on the 14th, which is my trip at 9 a.m. And then Marcy's doing one on the 25th, and she'll be doing a more typical plant walk, whereas mine is where you do the iNaturalist and you learn about using iNaturalist. Final reminder, the Citrus County Fair is doing their horticultural exhibits, and you can, if you've had the plant for 3 months, you can enter it into the horticultural competition. They have a whole native plant section, so you limit it. And the other nice thing about their competition is you're not competing against other people, you're competing against a standard. So you don't have to worry that your plant doesn't look as good as somebody else's. If your plant's the only one in ferns, it doesn't matter. If there's 10 people in ferns, whatever, it's just whether or not it looks pretty. So those are kind of fun things to do. And the drop-off dates for that is the 24th and 25th of March, and then you pick it up after the fair is over. But we've been doing that for about 4 years now, I think. And I've gotten some blue. I actually got a pretty fancy ribbon other than a blue ribbon, but I encourage everybody to get involved in that because it's nice that they opened up that division for us. And we'd like to, tell them that there's a demand for it and, to keep doing it. The other announcement is that the FNPS Society Conference The annual conference is going to be at the end of April. Registration is open right now. It's going to be virtual for the sessions and the presentations and the lectures, but we are having in-person meetups around the state. Normally you would have a conference and you go to one location, but this one, it's online, plus 3 different options of where you can go to see things, have field trips. There'll be lectures and presentations at those as well. But so the last weekend in April is the conference, and then the following 3 weekends in May, there'll be different meetups around the state. So if you're interested in doing that, check out the FNPS website. And those in-person ones have limited capacity, so the sooner you do it, the better chance you have of actually getting a ticket. So our big announcement is the plant sale is now. So Sue, would you like to handle that?
All right, we have launched the plant sale. It is online and we have some forms here. So we have 6 pages worth of plants available for you to pre-purchase. The quicker you get your order in, then you get a lower number assigned to you, which means that if they run out of a certain plant and you ordered it before somebody else, you get first dibs. So get your orders in early. If you need to do a supplemental order, we can handle that. All right, but get your orders in. We take only cash or check, money order, I suppose, if you really want to go that way. But we basically just take cash or check. We will have some limited plants available for sale that day. That's mainly because we found out that a lot of people are driving by and they notice that we've got something going on and they drop by and they say, oh, I want to buy some. So we try to have some impulse buys available. Again, first come, first served. So the order form is available here. We've got a few of them printed out. However, if you've got the capability to print it out at home, we'd appreciate you do that so that we can have these for like the people that we go talk to. We also have some flyers here. We have these little half sheet flyers and we have the full sheet flyers. If you live or frequent a place that would allow you to put these flyers up, please take them and post them so that we can get sales from other places. So if you've got a community center or a library or a whatever kind of a bulletin board that you can put that up on, please come by and pick some up so that you can put them up. Okay, I'll have them over here.
Isn't that members only?
No, it's not for members only. Members, however, anybody who's a member of FNPS gets a 10% discount. So depending on your order size, you may end up basically paying for your annual fee with a 10% discount. So that's that. Gail back there has some sign-up sheets to work the plant sale. We're going to end up receiving the plants on Thursday evening or Thursday late afternoon. We're going to sort them into alphabetical order that night. And then the next morning, we're going to sort them into the orders so that the people can come by and pick them up. If you can work the plant sale, I highly recommend it. You will get to know a lot of plants. You'll get to see what a lance leaf tick seed looks like next to a Leavenworth tick seed. And you can see what a vanilla leaf carphophorus looks like next to a Florida paintbrush carphophorus. And you'll see that they actually are different. Sometimes the differences are really, really small. So if you're working, I need you to read the labels, but to learn the differences and see. In addition, if you're working at it, or even if you cannot work at it, we do need some supplies. So if you could lend us a few things, we would really appreciate it. If you've got some sunshades, like the Easy Ups, we could use some of those because we're going to be out on a big grassy flat area out in front of the Holiday Inn in Lecanto. It's right there nearby the Church Without Walls. So just a big open grassy area. So any shade, what we bring. So we'd appreciate it if you can bring shade for us. If you have wagons, preferably flat bottom wagons, whether it's a little radio flyer kind of a wagon or the fold up kind of wagons, fold up, fold out kind of wagons that we can transport plants here and there and the other place and to people's cars. We would appreciate you loaning some of those. Since we're receiving the plants on Thursday and the sale begins on Friday, if anybody has a teeny tiny little overnight trailer that I could sleep in, I'd really appreciate that. Otherwise, I have a tent cot that I can sleep in underneath one of the shade thingies, but you know. Yeah, I don't think they really want us to pitch a tent on their grass there. So, yeah, in front of a hotel. Yeah, I think so. Something tells me I might have a visit in the middle of the night, you know, with a really bright flashlight in my face. So something a little more discreet than just a tent. Also, if you are renovating or you know anybody who's renovating and they have old vinyl blinds, the 1-inch vinyl blinds, or if you're a thrift shopper and you ever see 1-inch vinyl blinds, please buy them or bring them to us. We use those for the plant identification markers. We cut them out and then we put labels on them. So we need vinyl blinds, the little 1-inch vinyl blinds. The metal ones, we're gonna hurt somebody and then we're gonna get sued. So it needs to be the vinyl kind. And for this sale, if you've got like those 2-inch faux wood blinds, we can use those for stakes, for identifying which orders and which plants are where. So if you've got any of these supplies, please come and see me. I will happily take your name and your information, and we will figure out how we can borrow those things from you. So please think about where you can put these flyers up, talk to your friends, download some forms, print them out. Rebecca has gotten the sale on lots of different media outlets. Talk to folks, let's get some sales going. This is our big moneymaker for us. So all your help is appreciated in whatever you can do. Yes. Also, because we want to have some sales or some plants available for sale at the plant sale, I would entertain a motion from the membership. Oh, okay. That's right. Yeah, I don't even have a board position or anything. I'm just nobody. I move that we authorize up to $300 from our money to purchase the plants ahead of time for the day of plant sale. We got a second there?
Second from Cindy.
Mm-hmm. All those in favor, members only, please. Any opposed? Good job. Thank you very much. Yep, that way we can have some nice stuff to sell that day. Thank you.
All right, and I did happen to forget we have Plant of the Month. So Ben, would you like to do your Plant of the Month for us? Yeah, give him a round of applause.
Thank you. When Joey came up to me and said, "Will you do Plant of the Month?" I said, "Sure." And she said, "Next month?" And I said, "Okay." We do need someone, I think, for next month. So just say, okay. It's not that hard. Actually, it wasn't that hard for me because I've done this before. I don't know if you've been here, but 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was 4 years ago, I made the same presentation. If you were here, you might spot it. Forgive me, but this is the right time of year, and since I was volunteering, I said, "Can I show the same thing again?" They said, "Sure." I said, "Okay." So anyway, I chose lupines because I like lupines, but it also is, okay, have fun. Yes. Have fun. Okay. I like lupines, and right now I like lupines, and right now is when they are blooming. They're practically at their peak right now. You can go out into the forests or anywhere where you might find them. You might know where in your local neighborhood they're blooming. You won't find them everywhere. They need the right environment, and they're very spotty. You never know where they're going to pop up next year. They're not always going to pop up in the same place. And they are an annual that always comes up from seed. So they're gone for a good part of the year. Then you see them finally starting to come back during the fall and into the winter. And then boom, come late winter, spring, They finally blossom, they go to seed, and they're gone.
What do they like?
What do they like?
Sunshade?
Well, we'll get to that.
Oh.
I can't tell you yet. But anyway, so we call them lupines. They're from the genus Lupinus, which is a genus of the family. They have a Baceae or leguminosa, leguminosa. The bean family, yes. So there's actually a lot of lupines all over the country. 200 species supposedly in the U.S. and worldwide. 8 species are found in Florida, supposedly. I'm not going to talk all about all of them. I'm going to focus on the ones that you might see here in citrus, which are the sky blue lupine, which is the most common one that you saw the picture of on the last slide. And I'll show that some more of it. But the sky blue lupine, or Lupinus diffusus, is found in our dry areas of coastal forests and in the citrus tract of the Withlacoochee State Forest. Later, I'll show one picture where I was just camping last week in the Green Swamp West and took a little hike on the Florida Trail that goes to that part of that green swamp, and we ran into large expanses of clumps of lupines there that were in bloom. So you just have to get out into the woods and you'll find them all over the place this time of year. They're a short-lived perennial, like I told you. They'll bloom for 3 or 4 weeks. Some will bloom a little earlier than others. You might find some that are bloomed out while others are just getting started, but essentially during the months of February, March, April, you'll see some blooming early and then late at different stages, and then they're gone. Okay, and then the other one that we're going to take a look at, you might find it around in citrus, is the rare lady lupine, Lupinus villosus. So, like we already mentioned, they are legumes. They're in the legume family, like peas and beans. Most lupines have palmate compound leaves with 4 or 5 leaflets, which you can see if you see them up close. I'm not sure if I have a picture that's going to show that very clearly, but I do have at least one close up. I didn't bring any samples because I don't think one thing I mentioned in this presentation is these flowers cannot be dug up. They cannot be cut and planted like Barbara showed you. The only way you can actually propagate them is collect their seeds when the seeds finally dry and ripen on the plants, and you know where they are. Wait for them to ripen, and if it's not illegal, go and pick some seeds, and then you can spread them and pray. I have never been lucky. I go out and enjoy them in the wild.
We have them on our property, and I tried to dig them up and transplant them.
You cannot do that. I mean, you just cannot do that.
Well, you can, but they have to be about this tall.
Oh. In other words, get them before they put roots on hardly. Okay. So when the lupines are finally finished blooming, they put on these pods. I'll show a picture of that. Those seeds dry up. They finally explode and they expel those seeds around. Those seeds sit in the ground and they might come up the next year, or they might come up the next year after that. You can't even be sure that they're going to come up in the same place the next year. So it's a real tricky deal. It's easier to enjoy them in the wild. They do propagate from seed, like I said, and cuttings and all that are not possible. The seed should be planted in the late fall in Florida and then allowed to chill during the winter. So they usually that will happen over their annual cycle of being in the ground after they, drop their seed. They grow in poor soil. They basically grow in sand. But they love it here in Florida because we have plenty of that. Once they do get established, and if you leave them alone to do their natural thing, they will propagate, and you can have a lot. So you just have to leave them where they are and let them do their thing. Okay, so here we have a picture of the flower. And it's a biennial, like I said. Now it can get 2.5 to 3.5 feet high, but usually you'll see a big broad clump, which is just one plant that is just spread out. So they come in these big clumps, and then you'll see bunches of big clumps spread around because the seeds will propagate. And if they're successful in the area, you'll just see plants spread all around, and they each form a big clump. They love full light, full sun. Very dry is great, but they're not salt tolerant. So here you see the seed pods before they've dried up, but that's what the flowers, you can actually see some flowers here. Oops, wrong button. I think you can see some flowers here and one that's already gone to seed. And you'll often see those mixed together. Now, this is the other lupine, which I don't even know if I've ever run into.
It's Levy County.
In Levy is what you're going to see more of, but supposedly it can be found here, but I have not found it here. But this is the other species they say is found in Citrus County, or can be found in Citrus County. And you can see it has a completely different coloration. And other than that, it looks very similar, but it's got more light, almost white-like flowers with a purple tip to it. Here's just some information that was on the Native Plant Society blog about lupines. Some of the other lupines you can find around, McFarland's lupines, scrub lupine. It has a pink flowered, it's a pink flowered endemic, and you can find that close by in Winter Haven and Mount Dora. If you're, actually getting around, that was submitted by Tom Palmer and Shirley Denton. And there's a picture of that one, and you can see it's a little bit like the lady lupin, although the coloration is different on the flowers again. Now, this is the picture I took when I was on camping this week with my friend Howard, and we was walking down the trail, and I don't know how well you can see with the lighting in this room and everything, but there's just clumps of it all over here, just off the trail. And I just love hiking in the woods this time of year and seeing all the lupins blooming like that. That might help a little. Not a lot. That helps even more. But, getting a close picture like this is one that you published. And I said, oh, okay, I'll just take a snapshot of that. But that's one that Athena just caught this week. So she keeps her eyes out for him too. And that's pretty much it.
Question and answer?
Yeah, well, any questions can be directed towards Steve.
Steve, does deer eat them?
What's that?
Does deer eat them?
No, there's usually a caterpillar that chews the crap out of them.
Yeah, 'cause I never can find any seed. I see the flowers all the time, all of my crops.
More like the practices.
I didn't really discuss that, but yeah, sometimes you'll come across a big patch of the lupins, a big flower, and it just looks terrible. It's covered with almost like a fuzzy gray cover. It's been attacked by some caterpillars. So there do have some native predators that sometimes knock them down.
There is a caterpillar that attacks it in mass, yes.
Frosted elm.
Okay.
I just looked it up.
I thought you would have those guys.
Frosted elfin?
That's a butterfly that eats it in a few locations, but it's a moth that eats it.
I've never seen them for sale.
Okay. And if you want to grow it from seed, this is what you have to do. They have very hard seed coats. You have to take a little pot or something, put a little notch in it, or you have to put it in a cup, pour a little boiling water on it, let it sit until it swells up. Okay? That will make the seeds germinate, but if you don't put it in a really sterile soil media, just like sand or something, they rot very easily. So,
Are you gonna keep the seed wet like you would normally a seed, but this doesn't seem like in the sand that would stay very wet?
no, if you put it in moist sand and you water it every 3 or 4 days, that's fine.
So do you want to put it in sand and not like what you would normally put in?
No.
You'd want something that's sterile and very well draining. So I never tried growing it in fertilizer or something, but definitely if you put it in regular soil, it just rots it. Okay. So So yes, sometimes it's easier just to treat them, put them in the sand where you want to grow, just don't remain place.
Nice to have a occasional holiday.
Okay, so I'm going to be trying to get Craig's PowerPoint up, but in the meantime, we will do another plant drawing. Sue, can you help her? Thank you. I've got glasses on so I can read the numbers.
All right then.
Rub it in.
Mm-hmm. 679. 700. 772. Yep. You bought it. You bought a ticket. You could, yeah, jump in there. 662. How's that? There you go. 662. Good job. 774. How about 725?
I have that, but I've already got 2 plans.
I was the next one down.
How about 786? 781. There we go. 749. 749. There you go, Sandy. 787. Okay, 787. There we go. 766. And let's just do one more. Yep.
We'll have to do it after the program.
And 711. How are we doing it back there? Okay, Roger. How many you got left there, Donna? 711. Oh, wow, we still got lots of plants left. Okay, let's keep going. Yep. 697. Somebody who bought early. Carol. 698. Oh, that's probably you again. 698. Carol, is that you? $694. You need to mix these up better.
I've been trying.
It's not just the glasses.
How about 764? 764. Oh, 666. Lucky number 666. There you go. How about 744? 744. There we go. 674. 674. We got an airplane. 737. 737. Who's got the airplane? Mm-hmm. Come on, somebody's leaving on a jet plane. 670. 670. 745. Oh, there we go. All right, there's 745. So we should have 4 more. How about 712? Roger.
How many?
Mhm. Yep. 723. 723. 738.
Are they multiplying?
I know. Somebody can't count back there.
Germinating.
738. 738. 675. 675.
That one's close.
672. Well, we're getting to the bottom here. If you bought a bunch of tickets and you won a bunch of plants, take your plants. 767. Another airplane. Somebody's got the airplane. 767. How about 664? There you go. Okay, I think we got one more after that. All right, 754. This is your last chance. 754. There you go. All right, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Gwen. Okay, so, yes. Is there any other business from the floor just before we get started? Are we good? Okay. All right, so then I would like to introduce our speaker for the night. We're going to be talking about working towards sustainable landscapes, and our always engaging speaker, Dr. Craig Huegel, uses Central Florida landscapes as laboratories to evaluate native plants, and he grows a wide variety of species that are commonly propagated elsewhere, that are not commonly propagated elsewhere, but maybe should be. He'll discuss what a sustainable landscape encompasses, mostly focusing on natives, but never overlooking what works to boost ecology. He also has 2 plant sales during the year, and he's trying to figure out when the next one will be, but that's down in Pasco County. If anybody's interested, that'll be this summer's maybe-ish. Craig is the owner and operator of Hawthorn Hill Native Wildflowers. He teaches biology. Do you still teach biology? No, you're on hiatus from biology. He's a former faculty member of the Department of Wildlife Ecology and Conservation at the University of Florida, where he co-founded the Cooperative Urban Wildlife Extension Program. He is the author of Native Florida Plants for Shady Landscapes, Native Wildflowers and Other Ground Covers for Florida Landscapes, and Native Plant Landscaping for Florida Wildlife, which he has brought some copies of his books that'll be available tonight after his presentation. So I would like to thank Craig and come on down.
Clicker? I have a clicker. Can everybody hear me? All right. The thing that eats lupins most is this little tiny moth about this big. They are a perennial that only lives for 3 years. So it may seem like they're annuals and you're out in the woods, but it will bloom the 2nd year with a few flowers. The 3rd year it goes crazy, then it dies. And it throws a million seeds out. And I love lupins, and I wish I could grow them. I have this little wildflower nursery, and once upon a time, some contractor that was checking out somebody's landscape called me up and wanted something like 63-gallon blue lupins. And Steve would know how incredibly ridiculous that was, because I've never grown them in a 4-inch pot before they die. And I have direct seeded them and they come up and they die. I have grown every one of them once. And they didn't reseed and lived, and they ended up dying, but it just took 3 years instead of a month and a half. It's such a beautiful plant. Get out and enjoy them. I am currently the director of the USF Botanical Garden, so I'm not retired, and I don't really figure I'm going to. So I would welcome you to come down there. I'm planting a lot of natives. If there was any hole within the gardens landscape plan. It was the fact that we had maybe 50 really beautiful species of native trees that got planted really early, that didn't die in really hard freezes over the decades that followed, like most of the tropicals that got planted by the other guy. I had nothing to do with that. So we have one of the biggest red buckeyes I've ever seen in my life is in full bloom right now. We have a monster Chickasaw plum. We have some really huge Shumard oaks and things that you might not expect we would have down there. But I probably added at least another 50 or 60 tree and a wildflower meadow with many dozens of wildflowers that keep growing. Some pitcher plant bogs that are doing really well. And it's been a lot of fun. I want to thank you for inviting me to come back. And even though I got lost with Google Maps lady, Janie back there saved me with her phone. And I came up with my partner, Jane. And it's great to be here. After all those years of COVID, it seemed like years and years, maybe it did to you, of not getting out and interacting with anybody, much less speaking to anyone. You're going to be subject to the fact that I haven't been able to speak to anybody hardly in ages. So, and I tend to be long-winded. What I want to do today is do a talk that I gave in Vero Beach at a sustainability conference. And so it's a little different than what I normally do if you've heard me before, but there's certainly a lot of similarities. I've been doing this for 35 years. When I first came here, people like Steve Farnsworth were one of the few people I met that were growing native plants and trying to push them on people. And I had to go to the floor, you know, this isn't part of my talk at all, so this is what I'm subjecting you to. I could not find a white or a Spanish stopper to save my life, and I figured they would grow in Pinellas County. I was doing this native plant landscape. And I go all the way to Florida Keys Native Nursery in North Key Largo to find somebody that was growing them. Basically, I was there for a business meeting with the urban wildlife program I was involved with. And it was crazy. There was 5 or 6 people, and I would give talks to extension offices if the Hort agent was interested, and there was only a couple of counties that were, and I would get 5 or 6 people that lukewarmly listened to me, and maybe 2 or 3 that did something when I got done. It's amazing. This room has this many people, and the Facebook groups and other social media things I'm involved with have hundreds and hundreds of people that are looking for information. So we are making progress. When we talk about creating sustainable landscapes, which in my mind is more than planting natives, we are making a difference, which I would not have believed 30 years ago when I'd run around without my cool little suitcase that I have over there, hoping somebody would listen to me. So let's do this. This was my neighbor across the street when I lived in Seminole. And when I got ready to move, they were happy. And the guy that owned this house is a lawyer, but his dad did most of the work. You know, his son would be working and his dad would work in the yard, and they loved this place. And they could not understand how I could let my yard go to hell the way I had. And they were looking forward to the next person. And the funny thing was that it was not my house, it was my ex-wife, and she sold it to somebody who loved the landscape. So it's still there. They would put up those signs. You've probably seen them before. I don't know if I have it in this picture or in this talk at all anymore, but one of those little yard signs you put in after you've made your yard so toxic that it says, don't walk out here for 24 hours, you're going to die, your dog's going to die, your cat's going to die, everything's going to die. And on the picture is a frog. Can you imagine anything as ridiculous as having a frog that has this porous skin that's smiling because I just poisoned this thing? I mean, all that had to do is crawl through it. It's going to die, right? What I want to talk about today, and I eventually will get to this, is moving from a traditional landscape like this that I suspect none of you have, at least not completely, Because there's elements in here that aren't that bad. He does have some live oaks, but they were, oh shit. They were shading his grass and it wasn't growing very well. So he got a tree permit and he took 2 or 3 of these large oaks down. And the hilarious part was the county made him replant DBH. So he ended up with like 5 live oaks in his front yard that were going to be bigger than these eventually. But for a short time, his grass that he dearly loved was doing really well. I think when we're moving towards what I consider to be a sustainable landscape, one that will survive through time without inputs, that doesn't mean we don't manage. The biggest fallacy, one of the biggest fallacies I think that some native plant movements have is that you plant it and it just does okay by itself. Does anybody have a landscape that does okay by itself? Because I've never seen it. You know, you got to manage it. Natural areas are managed either by nature or by land managers, but they don't just sit there or they turn into oak forests. We have to manage our property, but we can do that without the inputs that a traditional landscape has. And this is in Apalachicola, and I've used this slide in one form or another for so many years. If you haven't been up to Apalachicola National Forest, you know, Florida has the most amazing diversity and the most beautiful state that I've ever been in. That's what keeps me here. I'm from Wisconsin. I've been here 35 years. I never vacationed here. I had no desire to come to Florida, but I got a job and I had 2 kids and 3 dogs. And it's like, oh, hell, I got to come somewhere. And so I came here, and I've 3rd richest diversity of any state in the nation. We have more species of wildlife. That includes all the little guys as much as the big guys like manatees and panthers and bears. And the 3rd richest diversity in native plants. If anybody tells you that somehow using native plants restricts your landscape ability, they know nothing, because we have so many things to choose from, but we don't use enough of them. And I'm not going to go into that. Why don't we plunk a house down in here? I hope we don't get me wrong, but why doesn't everybody in this room and the entire state of Florida say, this is what my front yard and backyard and side yard should look like? Takes a ton of work. But when we're looking for sustainability, and if we're looking for diversity, if we're looking to create a difference from our landscape in the biodiversity collapse that's going on worldwide, this kind of approach would work if you have the right kind of soils. So it requires these things, and I'm not going to read them. You can read them. I clicked it pretty fast because I'm talking way too much already. Plant composition, because I'm going to get to each of them. First thing up there was the composition of plants. Way too long. And maybe some of you in this room, but you don't have to admit it. I'm not going to have you raise hands. Selected plants in our landscapes, mostly based on aesthetics. I think the biggest mistake that horticulture departments, etc., all the landscape companies in the universe have foisted upon us is the fact that our landscape is supposed to be pretty. Now, I got nothing against beauty, don't get me wrong. And there are lots of native plants that are beautiful unto their own right. But it's got to be more than aesthetics that we choose from. When we're choosing our plant palette, it's got to be for the ecological value that plant conveys to my landscape. What is it going to do? I use this example all the time, but I bet if you were to get a dog or a cat, you would research it just a little bit, right? You'd probably be ready for it when you brought it home. You'd have a dog bowl and dog food and a leash and all kinds of things. And you might have already talked to a vet because you know where you're going to take it. You go to Walmart, Kmart, Garden Center, it doesn't matter where it is. You see a plant, you buy it because it looks cute. And you figure you're going to find a place to put it. I know so many people that do that. I don't know where I'm going to put this, but geez, this is pretty. It's like that plant is somehow not a real living creature. You know, I wrote the last book that Wendy didn't mention, which is basically the nature of plants and how they work. My ex-wife hated that. Plants don't work. Well, okay, but you know what I mean, right? I'm not going to explain it to you. So many of us don't really understand how complex plants are. They really are. They have to do everything an animal does, right? They have to pick the right mate. That doesn't just mean the right species. A lot of plants are capable of saying, sorry, guy, you don't work. I want the guy over there. We know that plants can feed and take care of their offspring and put out things that make it more difficult for offspring, even of the same species, from somebody else. That in a forest, that the so-called mother tree, we always pick on mothers, but really a tree is a mom and a dad, is feeding it with that excess photosynthesis it doesn't really require until it gets higher in the canopy. We know the plants talk to each other. We know the plants defend themselves. Plants just can't move. I think it's just the most amazing thing that we have this thing that survived and evolved just like animals do, with all of the same problems and needs as animals do, but they can't move once they hit the ground and start to sprout. That makes them, to me, more fascinating. Aristotle thought plants were really boring. I think they're way more, and I'm a wildlife biologist by background, way more interesting than animals if you really stop to think about it. So when we go to buy a plant, don't think it's a plant. It's not. It's a complex creature that has its own needs and requirements, etc. And we have to know where we're going to put it. What's it going to do? And that last thing, of course, is what is its ecological value? I like to pick on crotons. If you got a croton, don't raise your hand and don't admit it to me, please. What do you use those plants? I mean, people put in crotons. Why? Why would you plant a croton? Because it's got colorful leaves and it makes my yard look good. What does it do? There's no bird. I bet none of you have ever found a bird nest in a croton. I bet none of you have seen something feeding on croton berries. You probably don't see anything eating croton leaves even. You know, when my plants get eaten by something, I'm excited. I know I've done the right thing. So many people plant plants and then they'll call the extension officer, something's eating my plants. It's like, thank God something's eating. Isn't that why they're there? They've evolved to be eaten by something. That lupin has evolved to be eaten. And we're going, you know, I used to walk by those lupins and they'd be all emaciated, eaten up. And I go, that's such a beautiful flower. What a shame. I wish I could spray that thing, save it from being eaten. It's been eaten for millions of years, perhaps, but at least hundreds of thousands, and it's still with us. And by being eaten, it's providing a function in a landscape that's either caterpillars that birds need or, countless other things. Those insects are the foundation of the ecology of every plant community that exists. And so having them doing their thing, leaf cutter bees chewing a hunk of leaf off to feed their little maggoty larvae so they can turn into more bees. What is the value? When we look at a plant, we want it to be pretty, I think. But sometimes beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You know, I love hawthorns. I got this incredible, it was like one of the biggest days of the year when my ex-wife picked up a haw I didn't have from Steve back there. And I thought, oh my God, I finally got another one. Because the one I had died a few years earlier and I didn't know anyone that grew it. And they're thorny and they're not the world's most beautiful full tree. But when they're in bloom, I get a giant kick out of them. And when they produce fruit for birds, I know I'm doing the right thing. Aesthetics. I'm not ever going to tell anyone that we can't love the way our yard looks. But you know, if we're planting for the rest of the world and not just for us, we see beauty in things that might not have been beautiful before because we know that we're connecting to the world around us. Has anyone ever been to Rotunda? Because that's what's on the left here. Oh God, don't go there. You did, you found your way out? I mean, look at that thing. Who designed that concentric circles? Oh my God. Yeah, or 1 month. You got out. That's good. I'd take food and water with me if I go in that place. And when you look at that, you're not seeing any green except for a couple of shade trees, right? Because we always feel like we got to have a shade tree. It's hot. So I need a shade tree. Doesn't matter what it is. It's just a shade tree. We don't think about what that shade tree is going to do in terms of habitat value. And that little riffly thing off on the other side is my former water feature in my typical subdivision yard. But, you know, I lost my job. People say that all the time, right? Have you ever said I lost my job? During the big George Bush economic collapse, George W., I wasn't employed anymore one day. They fired all of us. They just couldn't afford us all. And I was depressed. They weren't hiring any environmental people, but I could go bird watching in my backyard. So I did. I had close to 30 migrating wood warblers and every tanager, thrush, bunting. Oh my God, when the painted bunnies came in and landed on top of me, I was talking on the phone. I had to stop talking and say, I'm going to call you back. There is a painted bunting in my tree. They might have thought I was nuts, but you understand it. And that yard, my yard was the only place those things were because they weren't in any of my neighbors' yards. I got a postage stamp, traditional landscape size lot, and I had so many things that were able to use it. So what are the functions? And I'm going to go over this pretty quick because I think you probably know most of this. I don't always get to speak to native plant chapters. Plants provide food and cover. They don't provide water, but we can provide it. And when we provide habitat, we are creating the ability for things to live with us. Because all those programs that have been promulgated over the years that are called backyard wildlife habitats are just absolutely wrong. We're afraid to put it in our front yard. Oh my God, my neighbor's going to know I have wildlife in my yard. I'm going to have a yard of grass in the front and be where no one can see. I'm going to put some wildlife habitat in that little sign they give me. Jesus. Our yard is wildlife habitat. Even if we just have one tree, if we pick the right one, it's going to be different than if we pick the wrong one. Food, and we'll talk about native plants. This is one of my haws. This is summer haw. Food comes in so many different things. But if we're providing flowers like hawthorns do, we're providing for pollinating insects. So I've got butterflies and all kinds of bees in my yard. Ultimately, that becomes food for birds that are migrating through. If I have pollinators in my yard, I'm producing these little haws. Summer haw is kind of large, so it's really a good squirrel plant because we really need to feed squirrels, right? But I love summer haw, and they're big, but crows and jays will eat them. Little migratory, warbly kinds of things cannot choke one of these things down. But I have food on multiple levels with something like a haw. And when I think about food, this is maybe the best haw, which nobody grows anymore, which is little hip haw. But imagine that entire sheet of white flowers across the entire tree that turn into little red haws that are the size of your fingernail, little fingernail. You know, that's small enough for any bird to eat. Summer haw drops its fruit after this summer, and that's not a real critical time. Little hip haw holds its fruit until somebody eats it all the way through winter. So maybe it doesn't get eaten right away, but it will be really important when things start to disappear over the winter months and food gets more scarce. This thing becomes super important. And so food is variable. You don't want to plant the same thing. You don't want it to be ripened at the same time. If I'm going to plant for food value in this sustainable landscape, I want food as many months as I can. I want it to be different. Not just the same size, not all soft little berries. I'll pick on beautyberry. I bet almost everyone in here has a beautyberry. What a great plant. Except, if you have a hedge of beautyberries, there is not enough birds in the state of Florida to eat all of that fruit. So what are you doing with a hedge of beautyberries? Oh my God. Birds love beautyberry, but my guess is if you had 2 in your yard, they would be able to eat pretty much all the fruit, and you could use the rest of that space for Florida privet and wax myrtles and all the other things that also have soft fruit, but are ripened at a different time. Things that are slightly bigger, slightly smaller, slightly softer, whatever, but a mixed hedge of things would make so much more sense. So, animals, birds, whatever, change their diet. A gentleman that has made the biggest impact on native plant movement will tell you that there are 10 best trees, and they're best because they have the most kinds of caterpillars that eat them. That's absolutely bunk. I'm sorry. Why? It's certainly true, but not every one of those butterflies and moths are going to be my yard at one time in my location on that one kind of oak tree, for example. And we ignore the fact that all the other invertebrates in the world are in the leaf litter, hiding in the bark, doing all kinds of things that have nothing to do with the foliage that's being eaten by those kinds of caterpillars. Those invertebrates, when I had thrushes migrating through my yard and ovenbirds and worm-eating warblers, they're in the leaf litter picking through things. They don't care that that oak tree is up there with 3,500 kinds of caterpillars chewing on it. There is no one good plant. And as we look to diversity, the need to provide as many different kinds of things as possible, I think, becomes obvious. And birds change their diet, which is the other reason why I hate lists. Because if you ever watch bluebirds, for example, yellow-rumped warblers, for example, when they're feeding their young, they're feeding them caterpillars and other invertebrates, and it's really important. The yellow-rumped warblers aren't breeding in Florida, at least not in my neighborhood. And when they're here, they're eating wax myrtle fruit. Bluebirds are eating. I was watching bluebirds in a parking lot in Ocala National Forest one time, and they had a bunch of flowering dogwood that were in fruit. And those bluebirds were in that canopy eating nothing but flowering dogwood. Now, flowering dogwood is beautiful. You could plant that and pretend it was just ornamental, but it's not, because it's providing all those other functions. And so we need to think about the range of attributes our plants have and what they're going to provide, and the simple fact that a different landscape with different plants is going to provide differently. My former yard with that canopy and all those warblers and everything else were mostly in there because we had created a semi-deciduous woodland that was relatively mature with a water feature. If I had done a wildflower meadow in the front, it would be completely different. But I would have a completely different set of wildlife. And I get to be the architect. You have the power to design your landscape to provide for what you want, but you have to take the time to know what they need. And that takes a little bit of research, takes a little bit of, I shouldn't say this in public, critical thinking. Help me, dear God. Okay. So, I love Catesby lilies, but plants provide food in all these kinds of ways. Nectar. I had a cardinal in my little arbor of coral honeysuckle one year eating the flowers in a way that I would have when I was a kid with red clover. I don't know if you ever did that, where you pull the little red clover thing on and suck a little bit of nectar. You guys know what I'm talking about. That's what the cardinal was doing. It was up there and it would pick off the flower one by one, bite the little back end about 4 or 5 times, spit it out, pick another one. I had a completely denuded coral honeysuckle at the end of the day, but it was worth it. It was so much fun watching them. Foliage, fruit are all different attributes, different plants. And indirectly, fruit is all of these things. That's the flowering dogwood. If you haven't seen it in fruit, we know that if we have hard nuts, that birds don't have teeth, so you're not going to feed too many birds with acorns and other things. A few of them They can swallow it whole and use their gizzard to grind it up. Seeds like this ash tree, nuts like these hickories, and foliage. Because tortoises don't eat every plant with leaves, just like deer pretty much do, but not everything, depending on what we're trying to attract. But of course, caterpillars are completely tied to individual plants. If it wasn't that way, butterflies and moths would be competing themselves to death. So they all pretty much pick something slightly different. And so they get that food source to themselves. And the birds that need these caterpillars to feed their offspring, those birds that breed here in Florida in the spring into the summer, require that. I get a kick out of people that are into butterfly gardening that bring their caterpillars into a safe place and cover them with a little netting and feed them until they're grown up and then let them go. Oh my God. If we're going to create a sustainable landscape that's going to survive over time and function, we've got to let nature be nature. Things get eaten. My caterpillars mostly get eaten. That's cool. I don't want all my Gulf fritillary caterpillars to survive. I want them to get picked off and be turned into baby bird biomass. Indirect food. What do I mean? Indirect food is produced in lots of ways. Plants that feed caterpillars, plants that attract invertebrates. We can indirectly get them. All of those invertebrates are in all of these things. Which is why I don't like a list of the 10 best anything. For all the years I've been doing this, people have asked me to make lists. And I have, I think pretty much to now, refused to do so. Because your landscape is yours. What you want to attract is your choice. The plants that you choose are your choice. When I took this picture, I didn't realize that thing was stalking a cricket, made it twice as cool. But you know what? If you have a smooth bark tree like a maple, there's nothing going to hide in it, right? It's not going to provide for any of those birds that are looking to glean caterpillars and other kinds of invertebrates from the bark. If you go to a pineland and you notice that the birds aren't eating the pine cones, some of them do eat the seeds, they're not chewing on the needles, but they're up and down those trees looking for invertebrates in that rough bark. That is what makes it such a great wildlife plant. It's not so much how many caterpillars are eating the foliage, but what is providing on a bigger picture. And last but not least, I always add dead wood to my landscapes because I think it looks cool, but it also provides a function. But the main thing out of this slide that I'll pick on is the fact that I like to use leaf litter for a mulch in everything I do, except with Wildflower Meadow, where it's not going to have leaf litter falling on it. And I need those seeds, those little coreopsis, such as especially Leavenworthii is annual. It needs to reseed. It needs to hit bare soil. If we use woody mulches because they're, quote, pretty, we have gone back to that whole fallacy of our landscape supposed to be pretty instead of functional. Because if you use leaf litter, it decays. That means I get to add it every year. If I have deciduous trees, which I mostly pick on because I like them, it means that I'm producing my own leaf litter every year. I don't have to add it. When I first started this whole thing, I'd go around the neighborhood with my ex-wife's Rav, and we would pick up bags of leaf litter. We'd look around, make sure no one was watching us. It felt really wrong. This woman across the street, I picked on her so many times now, but she had to wear a mask because obviously the dust affected her allergies or something, and she would spend days raking these leaves, and then she'd put them in the bag, and I'd walk across the street, take them to my yard, and dump them in my landscape. And I felt bad about it, but she was throwing them away. And why is leaf litter such a good thing? Because it decays. I mean, Janie made me, in a way, promise to mention this time. But your soil is the underlying thing that makes all the difference in what you can grow effectively or not. If we're going to create a native plant landscape, we have to have native plant conditions. When I first moved into that house with Alexa and Seminole, her husband, who is even cheaper than other people I know, had bought a bunch of really cheap fill. There was several years I could not grow anything in those spots. It was just god awful. There was not a living thing in it. Plant roots seek out bacteria, fungi, nematodes. There's good guys in all those groups. Living soil is so important. If you don't believe me, take something that's been in a pot and or maybe you fertilize it once or twice and put it in the ground and see how much faster it grows. And it's not because of fertility. It's because roots finally have an interaction with all those living creatures. We need to feed our soil. And we don't do that with fertilizers. We do it with decaying plant mass that feeds the worms, which aren't native, and all these other things they create the conditions that the plant roots require to grow effectively. Cover. Lots of kinds of cover. Because sometimes we think of cover as this thing, but it's really not. Because we need winter cover, we need hiding cover. We need cover that we can sing from if we're a bird trying to protect or announce their territory. We need all kinds of cover. I like deciduous plants. Why? Because they give light to the understory. And almost all the plants that people say I shouldn't be able to grow, that I do grow in my yard, are North Florida plants that bloom in the spring. Silver bells and red anise or native azaleas or all kinds of things. So, my gosh, silky camellia, what a beautiful plant. They grow in understories that get protection most of the year, but get full sun when the leaves fall off the tree. And that is critical. You don't get the same thing by planting at the edge of an oak a live oak canopy to get some light. It's not the same thing at all. That cover, however, when all those leaves fall off, gives me no place for birds to hide. And so if I really want to create a landscape that provides habitat so things can live, breed, and multiply from my yard, I need to have some places that are evergreen that they can hide out in when they're feeling threatened or when they're exposed during the winter months. It's not so much for temperature. And cover can change through design. It's another thing we have in our ability is to affect our cover conditions. So it's a rouge plant. Does anyone here have rouge plant? I've got a bunch of you do, right? Would you ever just plant one rouge plant? Eventually the rouge plant gets back at you, doesn't it? And it says, I can't be by myself. You know, that understory of rouge plant is, or if it was Kunti, which nobody eats and we don't have a talus this far north, it's pretty useless, except as cover. But I can go underneath that. You know, if I'm a ovenbird or a hermit thrush, I can run underneath that thing and you can't see me and I'm going to find food. By adding things together, taking something that may not be very, provide that much cover all by itself, but mixing it together, adding it in the right kind of quantities can make it really valuable. I don't know why everybody doesn't plant as many pink azaleas as they can. I love this plant. And I have grown it all the years I've lived in Florida, in a county way south of its natural range. This thing has no cover value, right? If you got one, the flowers are really important for all kinds of hummingbirds and bees and butterflies and all the rest of that. The seeds are not going to be useful to much of anything. It's sprayed up. It has just a few leaves at the end of the stalks. It's really not going to provide nesting or anything else. I'm going to just barely mention water because plants don't, for the most part. Some animals get the water they need from their diet. We have to add water features. Water features can be really important. Things that are not in your landscape, we should think about adding. And I used to be a complete anti-bird feeder-ite, but now I have one. Why? Because my landscape isn't providing all the food that it should. It's really young. I've only lived there for a little over 4 years. It's not going to do what I hope and plan for it to do ultimately. So adding a little extra is useful. Adding water can be useful, but think about how you're doing it. Because again, it doesn't make any sense to do it wrong. If we put a water feature in the middle of an open yard, we're just creating a bird feeder for a hawk, right? I mean, what bird is stupid enough to go get water in the middle of an open yard when everybody in the world can see me? You know, why did Marlon Perkins always set up his little Jeep at the water hole in the savannah in Africa? Because he wasn't going to ride around the Serengeti for a week and a half trying to see a wildebeest. He was going to go where they were going to come from. Every predator, every cat in your neighborhood, everything that wants to eat that, Cooper's hawk, pick on something native, is going to be waiting by the water feature. And the bird wants to be able to duck into cover if something happens, but it doesn't want it right there on the thing either. Why? Because, damn, where do all the predators live in Marlon Perkins' Wild Kingdom story? They're sitting in the dense vegetation by the water hole because they're not stupid either. That lion isn't going to walk 100 miles to the Serengeti hoping it stumbles upon something it can eat. It's going to wait for that thing to come, put its head down, get a drink, eat it. I got well, back in the old days, there wasn't emails. I got a letter from a guy, and he had put this great bird bath thing in his yard. It was gorgeous, and everything was right about it, and no bird ever came to him. So he sent me these pictures because I couldn't understand it either. And he had this like liriope kind of like forest that was like 6 feet deep and surrounding it completely. There was no bird in the world going to feel comfortable going to that water with all that hiding cover for a predator to jump out and eat them in. Moving water is better than still water. Water features can be super important to so many things. My old water feature from my old house, the birds would literally line up in this little riffle right here. Black-throated blues and hooded warblers, et cetera, red stars. They would line up. They'd hide out in that little bit of fern vegetation off the side. When one got done bathing, the next one would jump in, the next one would jump in until it got dark, and they would probably go off to migrate. It worked really well. They're not going to use that deep water stuff, and they're not going to use stuff that moves too fast. That bird bath over there at the extension office, you can see, is not really out in the open. There's a really big summer haw above it, and when that's in leaf, it's going to provide lots of cover and little places to hide out in. They can jump down in the water and jump up. But during the winter, they can hightail it into the palmetto. Native plants provide the conditions for wildlife that are native. There is no doubt that they've evolved together for hundreds of thousands of years. Florida's essentially been out of the ocean for 20 million years. These relationships have existed for a really long time. We've evolved together. That doesn't mean that every native plant can live in every part of Florida. It doesn't mean, oh, please don't be a zonist. I post this all the time. A few of you that follow me on Facebook know what I mean. Don't write me and say, I'm in zone 9. What can I plant? Oh, Jesus, what? It doesn't matter. Those zones were created for vegetable farmers to tell them when the last frost was going to happen. It had nothing to do when they invented that thing about what you can plant in your yard. What you can plant in your yard is what grows in your yard with the conditions you provide. It doesn't mean you have to water it, fertilize, or do anything else, because I don't. Janie can attest to that. I don't go out and fertilize anything except the potted plant because they can't get to anything else. But I have all kinds of zone 8s in my zone 9B or whatever I'm at. I have no idea what I am really, because it doesn't matter to me. I have the conditions if it grows without supplemental whatever, and I like it, and it fits in my environmental plan. I'm going to plant it, and it works. And I have things that only occur down around the Keys that have never lost a leaf at 25 degrees. And when the last one of those happened for 3 nights in a row, every native South Florida plant, the sea grapes, froze to the ground. they were dead. The buttonwoods froze to the ground, they were dead. The pigeon plum, which is related to a sea grape that doesn't get up this way, did not lose a leaf. I had 3 of them. It's right in the north wind. It was just fine. My wild cinnamon never lost a leaf. It held all of its fruit and flowers, and it's gone through, I don't know how many reasonably hard freezes. You understand what your plants are going to do and understand their attributes. Because some things like a bay cedar will die at 31.8 degrees, I swear to God. The minute it dips below 32, they're dead to the ground. It doesn't matter what you do, it will not come back up from the stem. But one thing I've been trying more to get across is this, and that is that not all non-native plants are bad. It's not as simple as saying it's native, it's good. It's not native, it's bad. I had $1 for every Facebook post I see. Is this thing native? If it is, I'm going to keep it. If it's not, I'm going to rip it out. I have a freedom yard. Oh my God, what does that mean? There's a freedom to do nothing. Whatever comes up is okay. That's not okay. There's no natural system that pops up in your urban landscape. There is nothing in my seed bank in my urban yard. Now, if you live in a natural area and you're lucky enough to own 5 acres and it used to be a woods, you might get a lot of cool things. But most of us that end up living in a developed landscape, neighborhood, subdivision, are going to have nothing but weeds in our soil bank. And our freedom yard, whether it's native or not, is not going to give us anything towards the goals we're trying to get. We'll get something, but I don't have enough space, and I frankly don't have enough years left in me to wait. I'm going to plant the most I can, the most diversity I can. I'm going to provide for the most things I can provide for my little landscape because my neighbors aren't doing it. And maybe they will someday, but I don't have time to wait for them to catch up. And we don't, because we're living in the 6th extinction event right now. And if we don't do something about it, things that we love like elephants and rhinos and giraffes are going to go extinct. Much less all these things that we don't really care for, like the snail darter and the Tellico Dam project, naked mole rats or whatever it might be. We have this megafauna that we're even letting go extinct. It's up to us to do something to change that. So not all native plants are bad. Why? Because some of them, regardless of what some people might say, have the attributes of a native plant and can provide a habitat function. My parsley is not native. The good carrot family plants that I put in that are native in my yard all bloom in the fall, and black swallowtails do not lay on them ever until they're in bloom. And so I've got 9 months out of the year that I can't feed a black swallowtail unless I put parsley or fennel for them. There's nothing wrong with that. I wake up someday and I read in the paper, there's no papers anymore, right? I read on the internet that parsley has taken over the state of Florida and it's been running rampant and we got to do something about it. Then I'll say, geez, I shouldn't have planted parsley. But I don't think that's going to happen. I have a pipevine that both pipevine and swallowtails eat. Not all the non-native pipevines have that attribute. Some of them only feed the polydamas or gold-rimmed swallowtails. And pipevine swallowtails have a much more restricted diet. But it's not as easy to say that non-native pipevines are not effective because I can't grow the native ones. That tomentosa, when I see it in the mountains in North Carolina, it's growing in moist, shady woodlands. And I don't have that condition. And everyone I've tried to grow has died. Now, I imagine some of you have had luck with it, but I've not. And if you ever try to grow serpentaria, do you know what that is? It's about this big. The only time I ever find it in the wild is when I'm hiking out in the woods and I see a pipevine swallowtail land on the ground. It doesn't make any sense. And it's landing on the ground a couple, 3-4 dozen times. Crap, there's got to be some serpentaria pipevine over there. And you start looking around on your hands and knees and finally you find it. Serpentaria has evolved to prevent that butterfly from succeeding. because there is no caterpillar can eat enough of one Serpentaria plant and have enough energy to get big enough to pupate. So there's got to be a really healthy population where it can go from one plant to another plant to another plant, finally get big enough. And so the Serpentaria is saying, you know, when I've got enough to share, you can eat some of me. When I'm isolated in this little patch, you're going to die, and I'm going to be regrowing, and I'll be just fine. And so to hell with it. That non-native pipevine works in my yard. I can feed both swallowtails. When we're looking at our landscape, we need to simply look at the ecological function of the plants that I put in. My key lime feeds giant swallowtails, and frankly, I like key limes. The bees like my key limes. I could plant wild lime, but I'm not going to eat that plant. I get more value out of my key lime. I don't see any problem because it does the same thing, but it has an extra dimension that my native plants don't. It doesn't mean I don't ever plant those things. It just means it's not as simple. If there's anything I want you to get out of this thing before I finally do shut up, is this. What do I do to, what does it mean to be sustainable? In my mind, it means that I can maintain this landscape through time, and the world around me can survive in it through time without me doing something really bizarre and strange, like going out there with will kill pest control guy to keep things alive for over the rest of the universe, or that I have to have an irrigation system or my plants will all die, or whatever it might be. Those plants, those attributes of those plants, whether it's native or not, is what's important. It's not enough to simply say, well, if it's native, I'll leave it. And if it's not native, I'll pull it out. Because you're missing the point about why native plants are useful or valuable, or why we should be in the native plant society at all. And that is because, for the most part, our wildlife that depend on us to do something for them in these days and times have evolved with native plants. And so I'm going to leave it with this because I've talked enough. And the last couple of slides are mostly just going to talk about what sustainability means. And I think I've probably already hit on that. So I appreciate your attention. Thank you very much. Anybody, if we have enough time and anyone dares ask me a question, I'd be happy to answer it. I do have some books. I can take a credit card. I did not come here to sell. I am the world's worst marketing person. But people usually ask me if I've got some, so I brought them up. You're not going to break my heart if you don't buy them. They're available on Amazon. Anyhow, questions?
What is the non-native pipeline?
Triloba. I got it from a friend of mine who lives in Pasco County, north of me. And when I went to visit him in his yard, he's got like he has 4 different kinds of pawpaws. It's great. He's got this sandhilly yard, and he's got this triloba growing all over his front on a little trellis kind of thing. And it had both caterpillars. It was covered with them, and the butterflies were going crazy. You know, it works better for me than some of the other things. And so that's what's important to me. Yes.
Where is your garden?
Where is my garden? The botanical garden, or mine. The botanical garden that I work at is at USF on their campus in Tampa.
Where is it, Tampa?
In the USF campus in Tampa. It's pretty easy. It's between Fowler and Fletcher and the corner of Bruce B. Downs. Really simple to find.
Charlie went there one day on Channel 13. You were all over.
I was?
Well, your garden.
Oh, good.
Yes, yeah, I have a house.
Thank you, everybody.